Now to Brazil, where the government's coming under fire for its decision to change the way it reports coronavirus statistics. With more than 36,000 deaths, Brazil now has the world's third highest death toll and the second highest number of cases behind the United States. But the country's health ministry says it will now only report cases and deaths over the last 24 hours and will no longer give a figure for the total number of deaths. Thousands of people took to the streets of cities across Brazil, including Sao Paulo, to protest for and against President Jair Bolsonaro and his handling of the crisis. He's been criticised for downplaying the danger of the pandemic and dismissing the need for protective measures. Now, South Africa's lockdown, despite being eased recently, has hit the poor particularly hard. Unemployment is soaring and millions are out of work. In one part of Cape Town, a former gang leader has stepped in to help those in need. His efforts have met with thanks and scepticism.
Many charities in Cape Town feed the hungry. What sets this one apart is the fact that it's organised by a former gang leader. Leon Meyer used to head the Mongrels, one of the most feared gangs in this city.
I know now most of the people don't have financial-wise and something to feed their children. That's why I'm doing this.
The slogan on his T-shirt says, "The harder you fall, the stronger you rise." It could describe Meyer's own life. He was behind bars for 18 years for crimes including a murder conviction. This area, the Cape Flats, has a reputation for organised crime and drug trafficking. Cape Town sees an average of 8 murders every day. But lockdown has led to a drop in gang warfare, according to a local pastor. He's been trying to mediate between gangs for 20 years.
I like to think of it, to call it a blessing in disguise, but it has really brought people together from all walks of life. Wherever I've been in the Lavendale area and Steenberg area, when I get to the other gang leaders, most of them were busy preparing food with huge pots. It's like the Robin Hood type of story, you know what I'm saying? Whether his motives are sincere or not, how do you explain that to a kid?
Desiree Simon, a mother of 4, says Leon Meyer has become a symbol of hope in the area since the lockdown. She used up her welfare payments halfway through the month. Unemployment is rife here.
It's very hard because we rely on people like this and our neighbours to help people that don't have. And it's unfair, and I think it's unfair, very unfair. We don't get support or anything. They only know you when you must vote for them. That's the only time government knows you. He's the only one that gives the community and supports the community. Nobody else do.
But criminologist Don Pinnock is convinced gang members have an ulterior motive for helping out their community.
Hi, good morning.
Gangs, in my experience, seldom do anything for anybody else. It's all about themselves. It's all about what they can gain. So, my first question would be, if they're distributing food parcels, why? What are they getting out of it? And they might want to look good in their communities, but they might be using that. There's a lockdown. So, how do you get out and distribute your drugs?
Back on the Cape Flats, Leon Meyer admits that breaking with the past is easier said than done.
Gangsters never going to go away. I'm going to be dead someday. The gangsters will always be here. They will always be gangsters. It's the way we stay here around and the way we live. They put us all together.
Are you still considering yourself a gangster, or that time is over for you?
I'm a gangster. I'm a born a gangster. I'm a mongrel. I will stay a gangster. That's the only way out for me. And through this, I can supply my people here around.
In the meantime, Desiree Simon is heading home with dinner. She says she doesn't judge others. Her priority is making sure her children don't go to bed hungry.
Now here's a look at some of today's coronavirus developments. The EU health regulator is looking to fast-track the approval of Gilead Sciences' antiviral drug remdesivir as a potential COVID-19 treatment in Europe. That's after the US drug maker has submitted its marketing application. New Zealand has declared victory over the coronavirus and lifted all domestic restrictions on Monday. Border controls will remain in place. The country recorded just 22 deaths. The UK's two-week self-isolation rule for most arrivals has now come into force. Airlines have launched legal proceedings over the government, against the government over what they say is a disproportionate step. Now, adding his voice to those of the airlines, the chief executive of London's Heathrow Airport has expressed his concern that the UK economy will be further held back by these new quarantine rules. The airport is normally the busiest in Europe, but has had to close 3 of its 5 terminals because of the lockdown.
Long waits while traveling are nothing new. But industry bigwigs in the United Kingdom are worried about a new travel delay. Starting today, travelers to the UK must quarantine for 14 days after arriving. So far, the rollout has reportedly been bumpy.
So all the plane was in the bus, even though before we get to the flight they say keep your social distance, keep your mask on and all that stuff, but the bus was literally 30 centimeters between all of us.
Apparently people are not informed that you need to fulfill an online form before you come here. I've seen maybe 5 people who came. The rest they didn't do it, so that will delay the time.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The government says it's trying to protect Britons from the next wave of coronavirus and is ready to levy steep fines of up to £1,000 to enforce the regulations. Detractors, like the head of Ryanair, have called the rules useless and unenforceable. Others worry it could be the final nail in the coffin for the country's hard-hit tourism industry. Meanwhile, the CEO of Heathrow Airport said the measures will slow down the country's economic recovery.
And until we have an exit plan from this blanket indefinite quarantine, then we're not going to be able to get the UK economy up and running.
The quarantine also extends to rail services and the country's motorways. London says it will review the measures at the end of the month.
Now, New Zealand has lifted all of its social distancing measures after reporting no active cases of COVID-19. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told the country they could go back to business as usual from midnight Monday, after becoming one of the first countries in the world to successfully eliminate the virus. Talking to reporters, the Prime Minister described her reaction when she learned that the country was virus-free.
I did a little dance. So while the job is not done, there is no denying this is a milestone. So can I finish with a very simple thank you, New Zealand?
Well, thank you, Jacinda. DW reporter Rebecca Ritters has been looking into this story. Welcome, Rebecca. So how have they done this?
Well, mainly because they were very quick to act, Phil. They were very quick and they were very sort of strong in their reaction. Initially, New Zealand, like most other countries, took the flatten the curve approach, trying to make sure that there weren't too many cases to overwhelm the hospital systems. But very soon, some modelling came out showing that tens of thousands of New Zealanders could in fact die of COVID. So Jacinda Ardern's government decided to swiftly change that approach, and she moved towards the elimination method. That is precisely that, to completely eliminate the disease from the country. On March 23rd, they announced a national lockdown, one of the world's strictest. They shut the borders, they asked everyone to stay at home, and they only allowed essential services to operate. Now, at the time, the country I shouldn't say only, but they had 102 cases, which compared to many other countries was very few at that time to have such a strict reaction. Now, they aren't the only country to eliminate it, I must add. Montenegro here in Europe has reported they have no active cases. Right. Fiji also, and the Faroe Islands. But New Zealand is definitely the first country with over 1,000 cases to have eliminated it.
So will they be able to stay corona-free?
Well, it's a bit of a million-dollar question. I'm not a virologist, obviously, but it will really depend on how the next phases of the opening up are handled, really. And while the country's internally opening up a lot, it's remaining largely closed to the rest of the world. Borders will stay shut. People returning to New Zealand will still have to quarantine for 14 days. It's mandatory. That's in a hotel. And there's obviously some pressure because economically the country's hurting from this. So there is talk of so-called travel corridors with Australia, which has also been quite successful in eliminating the disease. obviously, New Zealanders are overjoyed about their success, but Ardern was also, you know, putting a word of caution, saying we've got to be prepared. Let's have a little listen to what she had to say.
We are confident we have eliminated transmission of the virus in New Zealand for now, but elimination is not a point in time. It is a sustained effort. We almost certainly will see cases here again, and that is not a sign that we have failed. It is a reality of this virus.
So how have people viewed the Prime Minister's response?
Well, Ardern has won global praise. I mean, well, I'm Australian, so I'm obviously very familiar with her as being from the neighbouring country. But she's known throughout the world. She's got a huge following on social media. She's really popular, not just because of her response to COVID, but domestically, her ratings have gone up during this crisis. People globally and domestically think that she's done a really fantastic job. That's not to say she's without critics, of course. Obviously, the opposition are saying she let the lockdown go on for too long. I mean, the country heavily relies on tourism, and obviously they're going to be hurting. But she's come out to say that my budget will not be one of austerity. Spending is the way to get through what will be very hard times to come. So, you know, she's looking set to do very well in elections in September.
Right. Rebecca Risses, thank you.